No one at Ridgeway Stables had ever seen the horse flinch. Not once. Not in storms, not during vet visits, not when strangers wandered too close to his stall. He stood like stone, steady, unreadable, almost ancient in his calm. That was why they called him Ashfall. A dark, powerful horse with a quiet presence, as if chaos had burned through him long ago and left only stillness behind. So when Ashfall took one step back the moment the new employee entered the barn, everyone noticed. It was early morning. The kind where fog still clings to the ground and the air smells like damp hay and pine. Emma Caldwell had been working the stables since before sunrise, brushing down one of the younger mares when she heard it, the sharp scrape of a hoof against wood. Not aggressive. Not panicked. Just wrong. She looked up. Ashfall stood rigid in his stall, head lifted, ears pinned forward. His breathing had changed. Short. Controlled. His dark eyes weren't wild, but they were locked on something. On someone. The new employee. His name was Mark. Mid-30s. Quiet. Polite. The kind of man who didn't make eye contact too long but smiled at the right moments. He had started that very morning, hired to help with mucking stalls and basic care. Nothing unusual. People came and went all the time. But Ashfall had never reacted to anyone like this. Mark froze when he noticed the horse staring. Is he okay?" he asked, half laughing. Emma didn't answer right away. She'd known Ashfall for 5 years. Rescued him from a neglect case so bad the vet said he'd never trust humans again. And yet, he had. Slowly. Carefully. He let Emma brush him. Let children walk past his stall. Let vets examine him without sedation. Ashfall didn't fear people. He judged them. And right now, something in him had shifted. "It's fine," Emma said finally, though her voice lacked conviction. "He's just alert today." But as Mark took a step closer, Ashfall lifted his front hoof and struck the ground once. Not hard. Not a warning meant to scare. A signal. Emma's stomach tightened. That was new. Later that morning, things got worse. Ashfall refused to eat. The caretaker, Daniel Ruiz, noticed it first. Daniel had been a rider once, professional circuit, big dreams, until a fall shattered his knee and took his career with it. He'd come to Ridgeway to heal, telling himself caring for horses was enough. Ashfall had become his quiet companion, the one creature that seemed to understand what it meant to lose everything and still stand. "Ash never skips a meal," Daniel said, crouching outside the stall. Ashfall stood in the far corner now, head low, eyes tracking the barn entrance. Waiting. Mark returned with a wheelbarrow. The moment he crossed the threshold, Ashfall's body went tense again. His ears flattened. His tail swished once, sharp, irritated. Daniel stood up slowly. "Hey," he called. "Could you give him some space?" Mark blinked. "Me?" "Yeah. Just for now." Mark shrugged and stepped back. Ashfall exhaled. Long controlled. Like he'd been holding his breath. That was when Daniel felt it, that deep, cold sensation you get when instinct speaks before logic can interrupt. Horses survived by reading danger long before humans ever could. And Ashfall was reading something no one else could see. By midday, the whispers had started. "He's never done that before. Maybe the horse is sick. Or maybe he's finally snapping." Emma tried to explain it away. Stress. Change. New routine. But she couldn't shake the image of Ashfall's eyes, focused, alert, almost calculating. That afternoon, she decided to test something. She asked Mark to help her clean the far paddock, well away from Ashfall's stall. The barn felt different without him there. Quieter. Emma brushed Ashfall alone, and he softened under her touch like always. His breathing slowed. His ears relaxed. Then Mark returned. Ashfall's head snapped up. His muscles bunched beneath his coat, every line of his body coiled with readiness. He didn't rear. Didn't charge. He simply turned his body sideways, placing himself between Emma and the stall door. Protective. Emma's breath caught. "Horses don't do that," she whispered. Daniel, watching from the aisle, felt his chest tighten. He'd seen fear. He'd seen trauma. But this wasn't fear. This was recognition. That night, Long after the barn lights were shut off, Daniel stayed behind. He told himself it was habit. Routine. But deep down, he knew he was waiting for something. Ashfall stood awake in his stall. Alert. Listening. Daniel rested a hand on the wood. "What do you see, boy?" he murmured. Ashfall didn't look at him. He stared at the door. And somewhere beyond the quiet walls of Ridgeway stables, a secret that had been buried for years began to stir. Because horses remember things humans try to forget. And Ashfall had seen this man before. By the third day, there was no denying it. Ashfall's behavior wasn't random. It wasn't stress. It wasn't a bad mood. It was targeted. Every morning followed the same pattern. Calm when the barn was quiet. Relaxed when Emma or Daniel approached. Almost gentle, lowering his head, breathing slow and deep, the way he always had when trust took over. And then Mark would arrive. And Ashfall would change. It started with subtle things most people would miss. The way his ears angled sharply back, not pinned flat but tuned like radar. The way his weight shifted, hind legs braced as if preparing to move fast. His eyes, those deep, intelligent eyes, lost their softness and turned sharp, calculating, as if measuring distance and timing. On the fourth morning, it escalated. Mark was assigned to refill water buckets near Ashfall's stall. Emma stood nearby, pretending to sort supplies, though her attention never left the horse. Daniel leaned against a post, arms crossed, jaw tight. Mark stepped closer. Ashfall snorted, loud, sudden. The sound echoed through the barn. Then, without warning, he struck the stall door hard with his front hoof. Bang! Mark jumped back. Jesus! What's his problem? Emma felt her heart slam against her ribs. Ashfall had been abused before, badly, but he had never shown aggression since his rescue. Not once. Daniel stepped forward. That's enough. I'll handle the water. Mark scoffed. It's just a horse. The words hung in the air longer than they should have. Daniel met his eyes. No, he said quietly. It's not. That afternoon, Emma pulled Daniel aside. This isn't normal, she said. You know that, right? Daniel nodded. I've been around horses my whole life. They don't invent reactions like this. Emma hesitated, then lowered her voice. What if he's remembering something? Daniel frowned. From before. From someone. The idea felt absurd, and yet, impossible to ignore. Ashfall's past was a patchwork of reports and guesses. He'd been seized from a private facility that shut down overnight. No names. No charges filed. Just rumors of rough handling, forced training, and horses that came out different. Traumatized. And now, 5 years later, one man walks into the barn, and Ashfall's instincts ignite like a buried fuse. That night, Daniel couldn't sleep. His knee ached the way it always did when his mind spiraled. He kept replaying Mark's casual dismissal, "It's just a horse." He'd heard that phrase before. Usually from people who didn't want to be questioned. So he did something he hadn't done in years. He looked into the past. Using the old records Ridgeway kept locked away, Daniel found Ashfall's intake file. Sparse. Dates. Locations. A single photo from the day he arrived, ribs showing, eyes dull, a long scar down his shoulder. And one note scribbled in the margin. Responds aggressively to male handlers with strong cologne. Daniel froze. Mark wore cologne. The next morning, Daniel arrived early. He brushed Ashfall himself, slow and deliberate, grounding both of them in the familiar rhythm. Ashfall leaned into the brush, eyes half closed. Easy, Daniel murmured. You're safe here. But when Mark's footsteps echoed down the aisle, Ashfall stiffened instantly. This time, Daniel was ready. He watched closely. Mark didn't do anything obvious. No sudden movements. No raised voice. But there was something else. His posture shifted when he thought no one was watching. Shoulders squared. Chin lifted. A subtle sense of ownership in the space. Predatory confidence. Ashfall turned his head slightly, eyes tracking him from the corner of his vision. Then something unexpected happened. Mark smiled. Not at Ashfall. At Emma. You know, he said lightly, I've always been good with horses. Ashfall squealed, a sharp, piercing sound that sent every horse in the barn stamping and tossing their heads. Chaos erupted. Emma stumbled back as Ashfall slammed his full weight into the stall door, rattling the hinges. Straw flew. Wood groaned. Daniel rushed forward, heart pounding. "Ash! Easy!" he shouted. Mark stood frozen, face pale. "What is wrong with him?" Emma's hands were shaking. "Get out," she said. "What?" "Leave the barn. Now." Mark opened his mouth to argue, then Ashfall struck the door again, harder than before. Bang! Mark didn't hesitate this time. He backed away, eyes wide, and disappeared through the door. The barn slowly settled. Ashfall's breathing was ragged now, but as the sound of Mark's footsteps faded, something incredible happened. He relaxed. His ears softened. His head lowered. Daniel felt his throat tighten. "That's it," Emma whispered. "That confirms it." Confirms what? That Ashfall wasn't reacting to danger in the present. He was responding to a memory. A memory tied to one man. That afternoon, Emma made a decision that could cost her job. She called the number on Ashfall's old intake file, the rescue organization that had transferred him years ago. The woman on the other end went quiet when Emma mentioned the facility. "Oh," she said softly. "That place. What happened there?" Emma asked. A pause. "Then, we never proved it. But several horses from that facility showed the same trauma responses. Especially around certain handlers." Emma swallowed. "Do you still have the names?" Another pause, longer this time. "Yes," the woman said. "But you should be careful." Emma glanced toward the barn, where Ashfall stood calm again, as if nothing had happened. "I think we already are," she replied. Because Ashfall wasn't just acting strange. He was warning them. And in the next few days, the truth he was trying to protect them from would come crashing to the surface, harder than any hoof against wood. Emma didn't sleep that night. The woman from the rescue had promised to email the old records by morning, but the waiting gnawed at her. She lay awake replaying Ashfall's reactions in her mind, the timing, the precision, the way his fear wasn't wild but focused. Horses didn't hold grudges. They held memories tied to survival. And survival never forgot faces. By dawn, Emma was already at the barn, coffee untouched in her hand. Ashfall greeted her with a soft huff, pressing his nose briefly to her shoulder like he always did. The simple trust of that gesture made her chest ache. "You're trying to tell us something," she whispered. "I promise I'm listening." Her phone vibrated. An email. She opened it with shaking fingers. The subject line read, "Transfer records, confidential." Inside were scanned documents, grainy photos, and notes from multiple intake cases, horses pulled from the same closed training facility. Names had been blacked out in some places. Others hadn't. Emma scrolled. And then she stopped breathing. There it was. A name. Not Mark's current last name, but another one, listed under primary handler on several files. Marcus Hale. Emma's stomach dropped. Mark's full name on his employment form was Mark H. Lawson. Same first name. Same age range. Same physical description. People changed names all the time. But horses didn't forget them. Daniel arrived moments later, limping slightly as he always did in the mornings. He took one look at Emma's face and knew something was wrong. "You found it," he said. Emma turned the phone toward him. He read the name. His jaw clenched. "That's him." "What if we're wrong?" Emma asked, though she didn't believe it. Daniel shook his head slowly. "Ashfall isn't." As if on cue, Ashfall lifted his head, ears turning sharply toward the parking lot. A car door slammed. Mark had arrived. Ashfall's muscles tightened instantly, the calm draining from him like water from a cracked bowl. He stepped back, positioning himself in the far corner of the stall. Daniel felt anger flare in his chest, hot and protective. He trusted this place to be a refuge. A second chance. And now the past had walked back in wearing a new name. Mark entered the barn, smiling like nothing had happened the day before. "Morning," he said casually. No one answered. He frowned. "What?" Emma stepped forward. "We need to talk." Mark's smile faltered. About the horse. About you, Daniel said. The air shifted. Mark's eyes flicked briefly toward Ashfall's stall, then back. I don't know what you think. What was the name of the facility you worked at before this? Emma asked. Mark hesitated. Just a fraction of a second. But it was enough. I told you, he said. Various places. Contract work. Daniel took out his phone and showed him the document. Recognize this. Mark's face went pale. That's not, he started, then stopped. Ashfall snorted sharply, stamping once. Mark took a step back without realizing it. You changed your name, Emma said quietly. But you didn't change what you did. Mark's voice hardened. You have no proof. Actually, Daniel said, we do. He gestured to Ashfall. Mark laughed, sharp, humorless. You're accusing me because of a horse? Yes, Emma said. Because of this horse. For a moment, Mark looked like he might argue further. Then something in his expression shifted. Contempt, maybe. Or calculation. You people are insane, he muttered. I don't need this. He turned to leave. And that's when Ashfall screamed. Not a squeal. A full, raw scream of terror and rage that ripped through the barn like thunder. Ashfall reared, slamming both front hooves against the stall door, eyes wide, breath heaving. The sound froze Mark in his tracks. Daniel rushed forward, positioning himself between Ashfall and the aisle. Easy. Easy, boy. Emma's hands shook as she grabbed the phone again, already dialing. Animal control, she said. I need to report a former handler connected to an abuse investigation. Mark spun around. You can't do this. Ashfall struck again, the door cracking loudly. Emma flinched, but she didn't hang up. The days that followed were tense, heavy with waiting. Mark didn't return. Instead, investigators did. They interviewed Emma. Daniel. Pulled old records. Connected dots that had been ignored years ago. Other facilities came forward. Other horses. Other stories. Ashfall became the key. The one consistent witness. Daniel watched as officials observed Ashfall's reaction during a controlled identification. When Mark's photo appeared on a screen, Ashfall pinned his ears and stepped back, breathing fast. No confusion. No hesitation. Recognition. Daniel felt tears burn his eyes. You did it, he whispered. You protected us. In the quiet moments between interviews, Daniel found himself talking to Ashfall more than ever. Brushing him. Sitting outside his stall long after chores were done. I used to think losing my career was the end of me, Daniel admitted one evening. But maybe I was meant to be here. For this. Ashfall lowered his head, resting it gently against Daniel's chest. Trust. Earned. Weeks later, the call came. Charges were being filed. Marcus Hale, was in custody, connected to multiple cases of animal abuse spanning years. Emma stood in the barn aisle, phone in hand, heart racing. She looked at Ashfall, who stood calm and steady once more. You saved more than yourself, she said softly. But the story wasn't over yet. Because justice was only half the journey. Healing was the rest. The barn felt different after Mark was gone. Not quieter, if anything, the horses seemed louder, more alive. But lighter, as if a weight no one had named had finally lifted. The air moved more freely. The tension that had crept into every corner slowly began to loosen its grip. For Ashfall, the change was immediate and complicated. He no longer stood watch at the stall door. He slept more deeply. He ate with the calm certainty that had once defined him. But there were moments, small, fragile moments, when his body betrayed what his mind was still trying to understand. A sudden footstep behind him. A shadow crossing the doorway too quickly. The faintest trace of unfamiliar cologne drifting in from a visitor. Each time, Ashfall stiffened. Each time, Daniel was there. Daniel had made a quiet decision after the investigation began. He asked for reduced riding duties and more ground time. He wanted to focus on Ashfall, not as a project, not as a symbol, but as a living being who had carried fear for too long. You don't owe anyone strength anymore, Daniel whispered one afternoon as he brushed Ashfall in slow, even strokes. You can rest. Ashfall's breathing eased, his weight shifting as Trust returned one breath at a time. Emma watched from a distance, her chest tight with emotion. She had rescued dozens of horses over the years, but she had never seen a bond form like this, not built on dominance or training, but on shared brokenness. Daniel understood loss. And Ashfall recognized it. The first real test came unexpectedly. A visiting farrier arrived one morning, new, unfamiliar, male. Tall. Heavy boots. Strong scent. Ashfall noticed him instantly. His ears turned. His muscles tensed. Daniel felt it before he saw it. He placed a steady hand on Ashfall's neck, grounding both of them. I've got you, he murmured. The farrier stopped several feet away. You want me to wait? Daniel nodded. Yeah. Let him come to you. It took time. Minutes passed in silence as Ashfall stood still, nostrils flaring, processing. The old fear tried to rise, but this time, it met something new. Choice. Ashfall took one step forward. Then another. The farrier didn't move. Didn't reach. Didn't rush. Ashfall lowered his head slightly. Daniel exhaled for what felt like the first time in weeks. That's it, he whispered. You're safe. It wasn't a miracle. Ashfall didn't suddenly forget the past. But he learned something far more powerful. The danger was gone. And that night, something shifted in Daniel too. He stayed late, sitting on an overturned bucket outside Ashfall's stall. His knee throbbed, the familiar reminder of everything he'd lost. I used to think my life ended when I fell, he said quietly. Like I was only valuable when I could ride. Ashfall flicked an ear, listening. But you, Daniel continued. You reminded me that being present matters. That protecting something vulnerable matters. Ashfall stepped closer, resting his forehead gently against Daniel's shoulder. Emma watched from the barn door, tears slipping freely now. She hadn't planned on this outcome. She had just wanted to keep her horses safe. Instead, she had witnessed healing, real, unfiltered healing, happening in front of her eyes. Weeks passed. Ashfall began training again. Not hard work, not pressure, just movement. Choice. Freedom. Daniel walked beside him in the paddock, the two of them learning each other's rhythms. No saddle. No bridle. Just trust. On one golden afternoon, as sunlight poured across the field, Ashfall surprised them all. He broke into a run. Not in fear. In joy. His menere flew, hooves pounding the earth with power and confidence. He circled once, twice, then slowed, trotting back toward Daniel. Stopped. Lowered his head. An invitation. Daniel laughed, a sound he hadn't made in years. He rested his hand on Ashfall's neck, heart racing. I'm not ready to ride, he said softly. But maybe someday. Ashfall snorted gently, as if agreeing. That evening, Emma posted an update online, careful, respectful, focused on Ashfall's bravery rather than the darkness behind it. The response was overwhelming. Messages poured in from people who had survived abuse. From caretakers. From riders who had lost their way. All saying the same thing. Thank you for listening when a horse tried to speak. Ashfall didn't know he'd become a symbol. He only knew this. The nights were quieter now. The barn felt safe again. And for the first time since his rescue, Ashfall slept lying down, completely, fully, without fear. But one final chapter remained. Because healing isn't complete until the past no longer controls the future. And the final test of trust was still ahead. The day Ashfall lay down in the open pasture, Emma knew the story was ending the way it was always meant to. Horses don't lie down unless they feel completely safe. It leaves them vulnerable, unable to flee, unable to fight. For a horse like Ashfall, whose life had once been defined by survival, it was the ultimate sign of trust. Daniel stood at the fence that afternoon, leaning on the rail, his knee aching softly beneath the warmth of the sun. He watched Ashfall stretch out in the grass, eyes half closed, chest rising and falling in deep, steady breaths. His resting, Emma said quietly beside him. Daniel nodded. His letting go. It had been months since Marcus Hale, had been taken away. The investigation had grown larger than any of them expected. Facilities were shut down. Protocols rewritten. New safeguards put in place. All because one horse refused to stay silent. Ashfall never knew the impact he'd had. He only knew that the nightmares no longer chased him into sleep. That the humans around him listened now. That the world had become softer. And in that softness, Daniel found something he hadn't felt since before the accident. Purpose. The decision came slowly, carefully. Daniel didn't rush it. He worked with Ashfall on the ground, building layers of trust that didn't depend on strength or control. He relearned patience, not as a rider, but as a partner. Then one morning, Emma found him standing in the paddock, helmet in hand. "You sure?" she asked. Daniel swallowed. "I think he is." Ashfall stood quietly beside him, head low, ears relaxed. No fear. No tension. Just calm. Daniel mounted slowly, gently, listening to every breath, every shift of muscle. Ashfall didn't flinch. He stepped forward. One step. Then another. Emma covered her mouth as tears spilled freely. She'd seen horses return to work before, but never like this. This wasn't training reclaiming an animal. This was trust choosing to move again. They didn't go far. Just a slow circle in the grass. But when Daniel dismounted, his hands were shaking, not from pain, but from emotion. "I thought I'd never ride again," he whispered, resting his forehead against Ashfall's neck. "But you waited for me." Ashfall huffed softly, warm breath against his skin. That evening, as golden light spilled across the barn, Emma filmed a short clip, Ashfall standing calm and proud, Daniel beside him, one hand resting gently on his shoulder. No dramatic music. No narration. Just quiet truth. The video spread faster than anyone expected. People didn't share it because of the abuse story. They shared it because of the ending. Because in a world full of noise, here was proof that listening, to animals, to instinct, to pain, could change everything. Emma read one comment out loud as they stood together in the barn aisle. "That horse saved lives by trusting his own fear." Daniel looked at Ashfall, eyes burning. "You were brave when no one asked you to be." Ashfall flicked an ear, calm as ever. Life at Ridgeway Stables returned to its steady rhythm. New employees came, but this time, introductions were slow. Respectful. Guided by what the horses needed, not what humans wanted. Ashfall remained the quiet guardian of the barn, not aggressive, not fearful, but watchful. Wise. And when visitors asked why everyone treated him with such reverence, Emma would smile and say, "Because he taught us how to listen." If this story moved you, if Ashfall's courage reminded you of the power of instinct and trust, take a moment to like, subscribe, and share it. Stories like this matter, because sometimes, the truth arrives on 4 hooves instead of 2 feet. As the barn lights dimmed that final night, Daniel paused at Ashfall's stall. "Thank you," he whispered. Ashfall lifted his head, dark eyes soft and knowing. The past no longer haunted him. The future no longer scared him. And in the quiet hum of the stable, one truth remained clear. When a calm horse suddenly changes, it might just be saving everyone around him.